Grace to you and peace from God, our Father, and the Lord Jesus Christ. Good morning, dear brothers and sisters. It is a joy to be with you, to worship God this morning, this fourth Sunday in the season of ordinary time, or the fourth Sunday after the day of Pentecost. And this is also our third week working our way through the book of Romans. Thank you, Tom. Specifically looking at the gospel according to St. Paul. What is the good news that St. Paul was sharing with the church in Rome? So this morning we're going to be looking specifically at Romans chapter 5. So if you'd like to flip over there, now would be a good time. We're looking at this morning verses 15 through 19 that Tracy just read for us. But before we jump into our text this morning, I want to take a moment to talk about gifts. Gifts. I've always loved receiving gifts, and I've never been an incredibly patient person. So as you might imagine, this led to all sorts of tensions at Christmas time when I was growing up. My parents loved to watch us open our gifts, and they spent way too much money and way too much time invested in making sure that we all had the perfect gifts. But in my excitement, it was very difficult for me to sleep through the night before Christmas. So I would often wake up before my parents early in the morning on Christmas morning. I'd be sitting there on the couch staring across at the tree with this pile of gifts under the tree, having to wait for my parents to wake up in order to open my gifts, or at least waiting is what I should have been doing. What I was actually doing was coming up with all sorts of justifications in my head of why it would be okay if I just opened one gift. Surely one gift won't make that big of a deal. And then another, and then another, until they were all opened before my parents woke up. Now, they were obviously furious about this, but I think it still took several years of this sort of same cycle before I became a teenager and prioritized sleep over presents. Turns out that presents are going to be there whenever you wake up. I didn't get it then, but now as a parent, I am starting to understand it, especially given the fact that I have a child and my eldest child who is frustratingly similar to myself. Back then, I think I felt entitled to those presents, to those gifts, because they were my gifts. My parents got them from me, so why would they want to keep me from them any longer than absolutely necessary? Now, it is one thing to feel entitled to these kinds of gifts, and I think on some level, many of us feel this way to one degree or another. Even if we don't feel a deep sense of entitlement or we can't express it, at least we rationalize when we receive gifts from a relative or a loved one and feel a deep sense of appreciation for the gift, right? But one of my favorite things recently to watch has been these these videos online where people make these videos where they randomly give gifts to people. They'll randomly give like a stack of money to someone, and they video their reaction, they post it online. And some of I know I'm not alone in my love for these videos because they're some of the most popular ones on the internet right now. The reactions are amazing, though. They vary from outright refusal. People are like, "Oh, I'm not taking your hundreds of dollars. Why would I need your hundreds of dollars?" All the way to tears of absolute joy and gratitude. Nearly everyone's reaction, though, is, "Are you serious? Or is this for real?" See, in the context of relationship, there's a way to justify receiving gifts. Because there will probably be some event in the future where you can repay the gift. You can give the person a gift back so that you are squared away in your relationship. You get me a gift, then I'll get you one in the future, and then we'll be square. I can receive it and not feel bad because I can repay the favor later. But there seems to be something uniquely compelling about watching someone give a completely free gift. A gift that that person could never possibly hope to repay. I'm serious, I could watch these on repeat forever. Like scroll, scroll, scroll forever. But I wonder if this fascination isn't somewhat written onto our DNA because of this free gift of God that has been given in His Son, Jesus. See, my absolute favorite of these kinds of videos are the stories where people have great needs that are expressed through the flow of the video. Like the man who's lost his job, right, and is about to have his house foreclosed upon, but this random stranger comes up to him and hands him $1,000, and he's able to make his house payment, and he gets to keep his house. Or the mom that has kids with worn-out clothes or clothes that they're growing out of. Or a student who needs a new laptop. In the midst of these great needs, even the smallest gift is received as extravagant. So this brings us to our interesting little passage from the book of Romans this morning, from Romans chapter 5, because we see this term, free gift, repeated over and over and over again, 5 times in this short set of verses. And there's an additional associated word, grace, that's used an additional 3 times. So this sort of idea of there being this free and unmerited gift is repeated 8 times in this section. And if you remember, we've talked about this before, if you see repetition occurring in these texts, this is the place that our focus should dial in, laser focused. So verse 15 opens up with this simple idea that the free gift is not like the trespass. See, this is the problem from my money videos, right? What is the situation that's going to make the free gift story compelling? Now, if we have to back up a little bit in our text to figure out what exactly they're talking about here. And if we do so, we see this discussion of original sin, and the sin particularly of Adam, the first human. So in the event that you haven't read recently, Genesis chapter 1 through 3, let's briefly summarize those in order to better understand this problem that exists for Adam. See, Genesis 1 and 2 are parallel accounts of creation. The first emphasizing creation in a set of periods of time, culminating with the creation of humanity and the pronouncement by God over creation of it being very good. See, the second creation account, though, is a bit different. In that it is an expansion and a clarifying of the creation of humanity, specifically. In this, we see God forming Adam out of dust and breathing the breath of life into his nostrils. And it says after this happens that he becomes a living being, a living creature. And God plants a garden in Eden. And he puts the man in the midst of the garden. And it says that every tree in the garden was pleasant for sight and good for food. Also in this garden, though, we see these 2 other trees mentioned in the same section in verse 9. One, a tree of life, right? The other, a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So God takes Adam and he puts him in this garden and he tells him to work it and keep it. And he gives him one rule, right? One rule. You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. And it goes on to say that God looked at Adam and he said it's not good for him to be alone. It's not good for man to be alone. So he needs to create a helper fit for him. So God brings him every living creature that he has made to this point, and he brings them in front of him and he names them. Yet after he makes it through every living creature, there was no helper fit for him. So God puts him to sleep. He takes a rib out of Adam's body and he makes woman and he brings him to her, or he brings her to him, to which Adam obviously responded, hubba hubba, or whatever the Hebrew equivalent of that was. I imagine it was much the same. And then they're married. It's the first marriage recorded in Scripture. God institutes this covenant of marriage. We see the language used for the first marriage that we still use in our marriage ceremony now. And a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And finally, we find this newly married couple happy in the garden, as it says, naked and not ashamed. Can you imagine it? The scene? See, at the beginning of chapter 3, we pick up with a different tone. It immediately shifts to a dark tone. There's a serpent, and he begins to talk to the woman. He questions God's command, His goodness, His trustworthiness. And rather than rebuking the enemy, they buy into the lie. Right? She takes the fruit of this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the one that leads to death, and she shares it with her husband. Where these commands were given directly to Adam before Eve was even created, the responsibility falls on Adam. Eve was deceived, yet in Romans 5 we see not the sin of Eve, but the sin of Adam. Adam was given responsibility to fill the earth and subdue it, to work the garden and to keep it, yet he seems to be off doing something else other than his primary responsibility of keeping the garden free of the serpent. So whatever he's doing, he's off to the side while the serpent is speaking to Eve. And while God gives directly to him the command not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he not only does not stop Eve from eating of this tree, but he joins her in the transgression. The consequences of this transgression of the covenant that God made with Adam were just as God said they would be. They immediately died spiritually and immediately received the sentence of physical death. In their spiritual death, they felt for the first time shame. They saw their naked bodies and they felt shame. They felt the need to cover up. Additionally, for the first time in the history of humanity, they were subject to the necessary limitations that come with physical death and aging. First, this signifies the difference between Adam and Eve. We see the curse given to them in verses 16 through 19 of Genesis 3. To the woman, God gives a curse that affects only women and their relationship to their husbands. To Adam, he gives a curse that's universal to all humanity, right? Struggle and turmoil to provide for food until the day that we return to dust as we were created from it. See, this is the problem we find ourselves in. Because of the sin of Adam, under the same curse of sin and death, which was pronounced over humanity because of the sin of Adam, both spiritual and physical death. See, the rest of the Old Testament is both a showing of how incapable humanity is of living fully according to God's standard, but it's also a showing of God's relentless pursuit of his people, which culminates in this story of Jesus, right, that exists in the first 4 chapters of the New Testament, the Gospels. Paul in Romans 5 is simply theologizing about the meaning of Jesus' death and resurrection. So if our problem is the trespass of Adam, then our solution is the free gift of grace in Jesus. It seems that the underlying question here is how then can the death and resurrection of one man, Jesus, fix the problem of sin and death for all of humanity across all time? To which Paul responds, why wouldn't it? If sin and death can come into the world through one man, Adam, then how much more, right? How much more might the righteousness and life come into the world through one man, Jesus? It's just the way that it works. It simply isn't a parallel, though. Remember, the free gift is not equal to the trespass. They are not co-equal powers. See, there is another refrain that's oft repeated in this passage, and it is how much more? How much more? See, the quality of overcoming sin and death is infinitely greater than the power of sin and death. Finally, while the curse is for all, because all sin, the gracious gift is for only those who receive it. It's a free gift. Why would anyone not want to receive it, right? Well, I think for the same reason that people are reluctant to take the money from the stranger. People don't like to feel indebted to another. They're tempted often to downplay their needs, i.e., someone surely needs it more than I do. People love to be self-sufficient and rely on their own strength and understanding to meet their own needs. They're afraid of being manipulated or there being strings attached. And I think we as humans love to be in control of our own destinies. No, I think the fact that it is free is actually an impediment or a stumbling block, as the scriptures describe it, to people actually receiving it. But the question isn't, why do other people not receive it? The question for us this morning is, will you receive it this morning? Or will you find an excuse not to receive the free gift of grace in Jesus? Now, maybe you prayed a prayer a long time ago. Maybe you've gone to church your entire life even. Yet you don't know if you've received the free gift of grace in Jesus. Maybe you've been holding on to control in your life, or downplaying your neediness, or trying to meet your own needs, and it just simply isn't working. All you need to do is pray and confess your desire to do it on your own. That you can't do it, and that you're in need of the free gift of grace. I promise that all you have to do is come to Him in humility, and He will provide for every need. Humble yourself and receive the free gift. Now, even if you've been a Christian for a very long time, you've humbled yourself and you've received the free gift, I think we all need reminded of what has been accomplished on our behalf. Apart from Jesus, we had no hope. No hope. We were drifting, trying to do it on our own, and failing. In the midst of our failure, though, Jesus humbled Himself. He took on the form of sinful flesh, and yet He lived without sin. In every area that we are unfaithful, He was faithful. And He has offered to us, as a free gift, His righteousness as a trade for our stain of sin. So we must receive it with truly thankful hearts. This is why we come and this is why we sing on Sunday mornings, because God has done great things for us. That while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. See, this is the gospel according to Paul. Jesus paid it all. All to Him I owe. Sin has left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. As we have received this gift, so we should feel compelled to share it with others. See, if someone was on the street handing out stacks of hundreds, $1,000 at a time to anyone who would come and receive it, How quick would you be to tell everyone you know that there's someone there handing out free money? Heck, if you found a really nice pair of socks for cheap, how quick would you be to share with everybody that you know this gift that you've been given? If we truly believe what we say we believe, what's holding us back from sharing it with others? You have been saved from sin and death, and Jesus is willing to give that same salvation to anyone who come to him by faith. How many people have we told? Now, I don't tell you this to guilt you into some sort of contrived sense of obligation to go tell people about Jesus, but only to ask the question, do we really believe what we say we believe? So let's take a few moments to reflect this morning, to invite God to stir up in our hearts gratitude first. May he show us how to live truly thankful lives, thankful for the free gift that he has given us. And may he stir up in us a desire to share that free gift with others. Like I said, I don't want to do anything out of a contrived sense of obligation. That's nonsense. But I think that as we receive the great love of our God, as we have this gratitude and gratefulness stirred up in our hearts for what God has done for us, that it will motivate action. I believe that. So let's take a moment quietly to reflect and pray, and I'll close us in just a couple moments. Let's pray.